Watch as I turn my dining room into a snowy winterscape with this behind the scenes and set build of this image, Winter's Kiss. Alright, so this all started out with a sale. I build elaborate immersive worlds in my work, and unfortunately that does not come cheap. So I waited until after Christmas when all the holiday florals and decorations tend to go on sale, and I grabbed a lot of things for 70% off. I wasn't even sure where I was going at this point with the shoot, but I just bought as much as I could afford, and I struggled to carry it all to my car. Here I am setting up my backdrops. These canvas backdrops I actually hand painted myself in this very room. I have a shorts tutorial that you can check out, and I'm going to be posting more in-depth tutorials on how to paint your own backdrops very soon. Once this was set up, I took out the floral blocks to hold the branches up and started arranging these ice-covered branches that I got. These floral blocks were a bit flimsy for how tall and heavy these branches were, so I had to keep them from falling over with a few hand weights. I knew I would be covering them with the pillow stuffing, so it really wasn't a big deal. And it did take a bit of messing around with these just to get them how I wanted. And these branches made a mess. They left sparkles everywhere. So I did a quick vacuum and then it got back to setting up. Here I was testing out some of these other branches that I bought just to see how they looked. But I settled on keeping it more simplistic with just the barren ice branches. And then I started laying down the faux snow. I'm using polyfill stuffing here. I actually use this a lot in my work. I use it to mimic clouds often, but it also works perfectly as snow. And here is the final setup. I was super happy with it. You can see a close-up of these branches and pine cones, and I just knew these would photograph beautifully. Next, I got an ice pack and placed it on my cheeks and nose for as long as I could tolerate. I wanted to have flushed cheeks to mimic that kind of chilly kiss that the freezing temperature gives. Could I have added this in post? Yes, and I did exaggerate it a lot in the editing process, but I really try to keep the initial image as close to the final vision as possible. And now the fun part, I got to shooting. I placed an item where I was going to be to set the focus and then switched to manual focus to lock that in. I did a few test shots and then luckily my niece was over for a sleepover, so I put her to work. If you don't have a niece, get your boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, kids, or whoever else is around if you don't have a remote. Keep in mind everything was set up at this point. I framed the composition, set the exposure and lighting, and the focus was manually locked in. So all she had to do was hit the button and was essentially doing the same thing a remote would do. Now in terms of body language and posing, I knew I wanted to have closed off body language, very similar to how it would be if you were out in a very cold climate. So I was wrapping my arms around myself as if trying to get warm, and I was slightly hunched over to further exaggerate that. I also was taking full, deep breaths, exhaling out of my mouth, because I wanted you to be able to see that exhale and condensation that happens when you're breathing in freezing temperatures. And I plan to add that later in post. After a few shots, I decided I also wanted to place my hair on the branches as if it were incredibly windy, like it would be in the middle of a snowstorm. Then, after checking the images, I decided I wanted my light source on the other side. I liked how it looked facing this direction better, so I just switched the position of my light source and reflector. I'm using a Godox 8200 Pro with a smaller square softbox, so it is a more directional light. It's positioned very slightly behind me because I wanted to be backlit in the image. And then that light is bouncing off the reflector to fill in some of those shadows. And I am mixing the flash with the available ambient light here. Alright, we shot for a bit longer. I tried some different poses. I kept having to put my hair back on the branches because it didn't stay very long. I also tested out some other props, like putting this pine cone in my hair, but I did not like that at all. but I did add a few more pine cones to the snow and did one more round of shooting. And here is one of the final images, titled Winter's Kiss. Thank you so much for watching. Give me a subscribe if you want to see a full editing tutorial on this image, including how I added falling snow in post, and to grab my free snow brush for Photoshop.